Well, as far as my grandparents are concerned, I do not recall any of my grandparents because it was before the war and my parents had come from Japan. My mother was born in this country, but she went back to Japan, I think, when she was 2 or 3 years old. And I don't think she even really recalls too much about her own father, but mother to a certain extent. My father came to this country very early on in his early teens or mid-teens, and then worked at various odd jobs. And my mother was born here, but then she went back to Japan with her family. And I think when she was about 18 years of age, she came back to this country, and then she married my father as a kind of like a picture bride with a baishakunin. And I think he was 17 years older than my mother. And when they got married in 1933, my father at that time, I mean, he had done all types of odd jobs, worked various railroads, labor here, and worked in stores and so on. But in early 30s, he went into the tailoring business after going to some kind of trade school. And he opened up, or at least a little business location, and started running a tailoring shop. And it was next door, the tailoring shop building, which also turned out to be our residence, was owned by our next door neighbor, who was a medical doctor. In fact, he was the one that was there at the time I was born, and my two brothers and, one brother and one sister were also delivered by this Dr. Merritt, who happened to be our next door neighbor. But my mother, when she came, she was in Japan, and I know that she was, they struggled a lot in Japan, very, very poor family. Same thing with my father too, and I think they came to this country hoping to find some ways of earning money and becoming more self-sufficient. But anyway, in 1933, my father and mother got married. I was born in 1934, and I have a younger brother who was born in 1936, and my sister was born in 1938. And the business apparently was doing, I mean, it was not a wealthy business, but it was doing okay, and so that we were able to survive and get along. And as far as discrimination was concerned at that time, there's no doubt that the West Coast was a hotbed for anti-Japanese feeling. But in my father's business, he dealt mostly with Caucasians because Japanese couldn't afford to buy $20, $30, $40 suits or whatever, which was what my father was putting together. But because our parents obviously didn't socialize with other people, people of other races, I don't think they really experienced discrimination as such. By 1940, I think, I went to start first grade, and at the same time, I know that we used to go to some kind of a Japanese school on, I think it was Saturday morning or whatever, and I know we were also members of the Buddhist church before the war. But exactly what we did, I just cannot recall, because I was just too young at that time to even when the war broke out. Obviously, I didn't understand the significance of the war in 1941 because I was 7 years old at that time. So, but those are the things that I recall. I recall my father occasionally playing with us, and I do know that my father and mother was always trying to emphasize. One thing they did was emphasize education throughout the as long as I could remember, and I think that's why, like Dory always says, that I'm a kind of a bookworm. I think that was ingrained upon me by my parents. Well, after Pearl Harbor, I now know what had happened. That is that obviously they were forced to evacuate, and my parents, they didn't own the building. Obviously, they couldn't own building land. They leased it from Dr. Merritt, and I think in May, whenever it was that they were evacuated, we went to a place called Pinedale, California, near Fresno. All of us from that area went to Pinedale. And I know that my mother put together a lot of her stuff in the trunk, and my father, these are things I found out later, that we tried to have these things stored. And then we went to camp, and from Pinedale in September 1940, or maybe it's July 1942, we were all sent directly to Tule Lake. So Washingtonians, for some reason, went to Pinedale, California, near Fresno, then directly to Tule Lake. And we were there, and my father was doing some carpentry work as a laborer in camp, because I think all men try to get jobs, and my father got a job as a carpenter, I think earning like $16, $17 a month, just like all the other young people or people that, that were working in camp. And then we were in an area called Block 52, which is an area in Tule Lake that was a kind of a hotbed, general area of a hotbed for anti-American sentiments and pro-Japanese sentiments. And so my parents sent me to Japanese school in the morning and English school in the afternoon. There were others, parents who had their kids just drop out of English school and just go to Japanese school. But luckily for me, anyway, my parents sent me to Japanese and American school, and my brother and my sister were just sent to English school. They did not go to Japanese school like I did. And I think that's because in the Japanese tradition, the oldest son has the certain responsibilities, and I think that's the reason I was sent to both the schools. And my mother, obviously very busy trying to raise the three of us kids, and dealing with the travails of camp life. But I really don't recall exactly what my father did in camp, what my mother did in camp. I do remember like for myself, what we did was, I played baseball and probably some touch football. There are games like kick the can and tag, a lot of games that didn't require any equipment. I know we used to do things like that. But when 1943 came along, when they had the yes, yes, no, no, my parents decided to stay in this country. Stay in camp and not go out. And later I found out, for example, my father was very concerned about where would he go if he left camp. And we had 3 young kids, and there was a kind of a very, very scary time for especially Issei's that couldn't speak English very well. Where would they go? What kind of work would they get? What would the atmosphere be like beyond the confines of the camp? So, and then plus the fact that the fact that they were placed in camp, I think incensed a lot of people. I think incensed my parents to a certain extent. So they decided to stay in camp, and the people that stayed in Tule Lake after September 43 presumably were eventually going to go to Japan. But as the war went on and as things dragged out, I don't know what eventually happened. I know there were a number of people that went to Japan. One of my neighbors, our neighbors went to Japan, and they went as a trade for some Americans that were captured by Japanese. There was this prisoner exchange program, and my neighbor's name was Imai, and they did go to Japan. Their family went to Japan. They had 5 kids, either 5 or 6 kids, and they all went to Japan together. But at that time, my parents did not make that decision to be repatriated, so we were still there. And then I kind of became involved in because I was going to Japanese school in the morning, became this pro-Japanese exercise group. And we did a lot of, I think I was about 9, 10 years old at that time. And I know we were involved in getting so-called indoctrinated by some of these Japanese teachers that were in camp that were really pro-Japanese. Toward the end of 44, early 45, I didn't know that the war was eventually coming to an end, but I do know that we were not going to school anymore. I wasn't going to either English school or Japanese school, and by I think mid-45, a lot of people were just leaving camp, but we were still there. And although there were, my father eventually left in, I think it's October, November 1945 to look for a job. And he went to a place called Shingle Springs near Sacramento, it's near El Dorado County. which was extremely discriminatory against Japanese. In fact, when my father went to work for the railroad over there, they wouldn't even serve him. They wouldn't even let him go into the grocery store. So he had to go back to the railroad and tell him he needs to be transferred. So then he was transferred to a place called Clipper Gap near Auburn, California. And that's where he went, and eventually we were called, I think, March 1946. We all came to, meaning my mother and my two brothers and sister, and my youngest. We had a youngest child at that time, a brother at that time. He was just an infant. So we all came on a Greyhound bus and came to Clipper Gap. And you want me to talk about Clipper Gap experience? I could tell you a little bit about it. Clipper Gap after the war was a very, very interesting place. I went to school in a one-room school. We had about, I don't know, 12, 15 kids. But this teacher, her name is Gertrude Huntington. I will never forget her because she was the one that was instrumental in helping me. I mean, I think she really felt bad that I couldn't speak English very well. Although here I was 11 years old, I believe, or 11, almost 12, didn't know how to speak English too well and so on. She was the one that really helped me, spent a lot of time with me, and encouraged me to continue studying, reading, arithmetic or science or whatever. And she was, and because my parents obviously didn't know anything about college prep courses in high school, and here I was, getting ready, another 2 years, year and a half I would have been in high school. So she really helped me, and she was the one that told me to be sure and take courses like Latin and algebra. And she was the one that took me in her car to Placer High School in Auburn, which is about 6 miles away, and had me speak with a counselor and got me enrolled in these classes. And by the time I went to high school, my English was extremely improved, and I had no problem conversing by that time. But for that reason, I will never, ever forget her. I'm forever thankful for the fact that she did this for me. And then when I went to high school, I had some great teachers in high school. And at Placer High School, we used to take a bus every morning to school because I lived about 6-7 miles from high school. Just like the rest of most of the Japanese Americans, they lived on the other side of Auburn, but we all took buses to Placer High School in Auburn. And in my class, there were about 20 Japanese Americans, but of those approximately 20, I think there's only about 5 of them that now live in Auburn or that area, Placer County. Most of us came to cities and like Sacramento and so on, and none of us really wanted to go back to that type of life out in Placer County, or that type of labor type of work that our parents and our uncles or other relatives were doing. So. And then in 1951, I graduated from high school. And my father moved from the railroad work in Clipper Gap to Sacramento. And the reason he moved to Sacramento was I was going out of high school. He wanted to be sure that I got some kind of college education, and we had Sacramento City College. That's where I came, Sacramento City College. In 1951, we moved to Sacramento. He had saved enough money to buy a small house in what is now the Oak Park, and we moved there. I went to Sacramento City College for 2 years, and I remember people like Dr. Albert Rada, former Senator Albert Rada. He was my teacher. Well, there's another thing about Dr. Albert Rada here in Sacramento. He was the advisor to the Nisei Students Club. And we had a Nisei Students Club in Sacramento City College, which I didn't know anything about, but when I came here, I learned about it and I became a member and then found that Dr. Albert Rada he was a PhD, Stanford grad, and he was teaching here. And he was the one that would sponsor us, and when we have occasional social events, he would be there. And so I'm, again, forever grateful to people like Albert Rada, who had the compassion to make sure that all the students had an opportunity to have a social life and also be educated. So those are the kind of things. I mean, obviously there were certain moments of discrimination that went on. I mean, when we were in high school, initially we were called Japs and so on, but as the time went by, I was 47 when I first went to Placer High School, but by the time I graduated in 1951, none of that type of thing were happening. But initially, it was a little maybe unnerving, but as you know, time heals all wounds, and so that's what happened. Well, my mother renounced her citizenship along with a lot of other people, and then in 1946 or 47, I can't remember what year it was, a group of them got back together to regain what they had renounced under the duress in camp. And they paid an attorney by the name of Wayne Collins. He was an ACLU. He was a person that was really, really helpful toward the Japanese American. And I learned about my mother and Wayne Collins. And I think that was one of the reasons, things that made me become interested in law. And so after high school, when I went to City College, and after City College, I went to UC Berkeley. And although I majored in business and accounting, and also in political science, and I always had this interest in government and politics and so on. And I eventually did a lot of reading, and probably because of my father-in-law too, what I had heard about him, that I did a lot of reading about the internment. I read the different cases that were there. There's a Mitsue Endo from Sacramento who lost her job, although she's an American citizen, and Wayne Collins and ACLU filed this lawsuit in behalf of Mitsue Endo, challenging the constitutionality of forcing an American citizen into camp. Case went all the way to U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court held that the internment was unconstitutional. As a result of that, as far as Mitsue Endo was concerned, and that was the start of the releasing of all Japanese Americans or American Japanese ancestry from camp. The Mitsue Endo case just really propelled that movement. But there is no question that the internment or forcing people, American citizens, to deprive them of their rights without a trial is totally unconstitutional. I don't think in my mind, I don't think there'll ever be another internment. There has been movement, there has been a lot of talk about segregating certain areas because of some background or whatever. But I don't think that's not only is that not constitutional, I don't think that ever occurred because even, for example, recently there's the people that were in Guantanamo Bay camp. Now they have to be given a trial. You cannot keep them because Jose Padilla, who was one of those in there, in that camp, is an American citizen. And so they've now held that they have to give everybody a trial. And I think but whenever anything like this happens, you have to just immediately mobilize and be sure that their rights are protected. Just like, although in our days, I think the issue of civil rights was not as well developed in early 1940s as it is today. Today, everybody's keenly aware of the civil rights of individuals, and I think for that reason, it will be. Although can't say it will never occur, but the chances of any type of internment type of thing going on, I think will probably not happen.
You're talking about mass internment.
Mass internment, or even groups of 50 or 100. To do that, I think is going to be virtually impossible because people have rights. Even immigrants have rights. You can't take away immigrants' rights unless you can prove that they've committed a criminal act of some kind or act of treason, a specific individual. But you can't say 50 people should be interned because they fit certain type of criteria. You can't do that anymore because everybody has rights in this country. Even illegal immigrants have certain rights that cannot be taken away from them. One of the things we have to do is to educate people, as you are doing right now. You're the leader in this, of educating people about the internment experience, how that is unconstitutional. There are so many people who have not heard about it. There are people that are in their 20s and 30s and 40s. Some of them are people that I've run across, even lawyers that have never heard of this internment situation. So in my opinion, in my mind, we have to continue to educate people of the wrong, the tragic wrong of displacing people from their normal life without some valid reason. And I think that's a very important subject that we have to keep on impressing upon the people and encouraging people, other people, to relate that to, so that more people understand what had happened in the past and to make sure they will not be repeated in the future. As far as the internment itself is concerned, I think I would urge everybody to at least read about the internment and the consequences of the internment. What had happened to a lot of the Japanese Americans after the war is so sad. I mean, it just is dismal about how the Japanese Americans had to, when they were released from camp, whether you went to East or whatever, were it not for the good people in this country. I mean, especially people like the Quakers and the Mormons and others that were willing to take in Japanese Americans, not requiring them to pay anything but just a little bit, to stay in their hostels, and they stay in their places and trying to find work for them. So you can't just condemn Caucasians or anybody for this. This is war hysteria, and certain people profited at the expense of the Japanese Americans, but the others, there are so many kind people in this country that were willing to help the Japanese Americans, and to have seen all the things that happened to American citizens of this country after the war, because they had to struggle, they had to, virtually scratch for food and place to stay, especially when they come back to California. Just don't want that type of thing to happen to any other Americans ever. And that's what I feel. And I was very fortunate in this sense that, as I said, I had this great teacher. My parents were, really emphasized education. My brother went to Sac State and became an engineer. My sister went to UC Berkeley and UC San Francisco, just like my wife, and became a nurse. And my brother went to UC San Francisco and became a dentist. And all because my parents really wanted us to not to have to go through what they had to go through, especially after the war. And I think I'll forever be grateful to my parents for what they did for me. And I know my siblings are also grateful for what they've done. And my mother's still alive at age 94. We're celebrating her 94th birthday this weekend. We could never have done it alone. We really need the help of everybody. So in spite of some of the politicians and others who wanted to profit at our expense, we had so many good people helping us that we were able to succeed to a certain extent, and that's where we are today.